4 black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of the small diner at the edge of town. No sirens, no shouting. Just the sharp click of doors opening and polished boots hitting concrete. Inside, silverware froze mid-air. A fork hung motionless above a plate of eggs. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its hum. The door opened with a soft chime. A man stepped in, tall, sun-scorched face, shoulders straight beneath a decorated military coat. He removed his cap, scanned the silent room, and asked, "Who here is Clare Rowan?" No one moved. Only the soft drip of coffee echoed behind the counter, steady and slow. If you're watching this from a quiet place in the world, drop the name of your town in the comments. Somewhere, another Clare might be quietly saving someone too. Subscribe for true stories that were almost lost, but never forgotten. She woke up the same way she had for the past 3 years, before dawn, to the sound of nothing. No alarm clock, no birds, just the distant creak of pipes warming up overhead, and the soft groan of her knees as she swung her legs over the bed. Clare Rowan lived alone above the old pharmacy in Halberd, Oregon. The apartment was 1 room wider than a storage closet, and just warm enough in winter not to see your own breath. Her shoes waited by the door, laces knotted together from habit, and her navy work apron hung from the same hook as always. There were no pictures on the fridge. Only a single photo, yellowed with age, tucked in the mirror's corner. A young man in uniform smiling beneath the desert sun, a name patch reading Rowan above his heart. Her father, killed in action when she was 15. Her mother had followed 2 years later. The rest was silence, a lifetime of it. At 5:10, Clare walked the 3 blocks to Hillview Cafe. It wasn't much. Just a squat little building wedged between a tire shop and a payday loan office. But inside, it was warm, and the regulars came early. Retired men with nowhere else to be. Truckers with grease under their fingernails. A local teacher or two. Always the same faces, always the same orders. Clare opened up, tied her apron, and started the coffee. She greeted everyone by name, smiled on cue. She listened more than she spoke. She was the kind of person people forgot until they needed a refill. No one ever asked about her life. No one knew she climbed the back stairs each night with her keys clenched between her fingers, just in case. No one knew that her only mail came from collection agencies and water bills. And no one knew that every night, when the last customer left, she stayed an extra 20 minutes, cleaning counters that were already spotless, just so she wouldn't have to go home. She had become very good at making herself invisible, at surviving in the cracks where no one looks, and if she ever resented the silence, she never said. It was a Tuesday when she noticed him. He couldn't have been more than 10. Small, wiry, quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't shy. It was survival. His backpack looked too big for his shoulders, and he sat curled into the corner booth like someone who had learned not to take up space. That first day, he ordered nothing, just water. Clare brought it with a paper straw and a smile that didn't ask questions. He nodded in return, so slightly she almost missed it. The next morning, he was back. Same time, same booth, same glass of water. By the end of the week, a pattern emerged. He arrived at 7:15 on the dot, 45 minutes before the bell rang at the elementary school 3 blocks away. He never fidgeted, never looked at his phone. Just opened a paperback book, sipped his water slowly, and watched as the other customers dug into their breakfasts. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, toast soaked in butter. At 7:55, he would close his book, stand, and leave with another wordless nod. She didn't ask why. Something in the way he moved told her not to. By the second week, Claire had started preparing the booth before he arrived, setting a clean napkin, a straw, sometimes even a tiny paper flower she folded from receipt tape. He never acknowledged them, but he never stopped coming either. On the 15th day, she made a choice. She walked over with a plate of pancakes, said casually, "Oh, sorry. The cook made an extra. I'll just leave it here instead of tossing it." The boy looked up, suspicion flickering behind his eyes. But there was hunger too, the kind that's lived in, worn like a second skin. He said nothing. Claire turned before he could object. She returned to the counter and pretended not to watch as he slowly picked up the fork. When she came back 10 minutes later, the plate was empty. He didn't look up, but as she cleared the dish, he whispered, "Thank you." And just like that, it began. She never asked his name, never asked where his parents were, never told him what he owed her. But every morning after that, she brought him something. An extra from the kitchen, she always said. Pancakes on Mondays, scrambled eggs and toast on Tuesdays, oatmeal when the mornings turned cold. He never refused, never initiated conversation beyond that same quiet thank you. But he ate, fast, like he was afraid it might be taken back. No one else in the diner said much, though a few began to notice. A regular named Harold leaned over one morning and asked, "That your kid?" "No," Claire said. "Does he belong to anyone?" "I don't know," she replied. "But he's hungry." Harold squinted at her, then turned back to his newspaper. That was the end of it, until Kathy spoke up. Kathy worked the grill and had been flipping hash browns at Hillview since before Claire was born. She wasn't mean, just seasoned. That morning, she pulled Claire aside and said, "You're feeding a stray." Claire looked at her without flinching. "I used to be that hungry too." It was the most personal thing she had ever said in that kitchen. Kathy didn't argue. She just nodded once, turned back to her grill. The boy, still nameless, never missed a day. He always sat facing the door, book open, eyes watching everything while giving away nothing. And over time, something shifted. His shoulders, once tensed and tight, started to ease. His eyes met hers, not long, but longer than before. 2 seconds instead of 1, a breath instead of a blink. It was barely anything. To Claire, it was everything. Some people noticed. Most didn't say a word, but a few couldn't help themselves. "Playing charity worker on company time?" a man in a blazer muttered one morning. He always sat at the window table, always ordered egg whites and black coffee, always spoke like he'd paid extra for the right to judge. Claire didn't answer. She refilled his cup, nodded, and moved on. Another regular, one of those men who used to be someone in a town that never let them forget, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "In my day, kids earned their meals. Now all they gotta do is look sad." Laughter followed. Claire didn't flinch. She'd learned a long time ago that defending kindness only hardened the hearts of those who refused to understand it. But it didn't end there. Mark, the manager, pulled her into the back one morning. The office smelled like overcooked bacon and mildew. He shut the door behind her, sighed, rubbed his temples. "I've been watching," he said. "That kid, he's not paying. You can't just give away food." Claire stood with her hands behind her back, her apron slightly wrinkled from the morning rush. "I'll pay for it," she said. "From my tips." Mark blinked. "Claire, your tips barely cover your rent." "I know." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "You're serious?" She nodded. "It's just one meal a day. I can manage." For a moment, he studied her like he was looking for an angle, some reason to say no. But all he found was the kind of stillness that doesn't bend. "Fine," he muttered. "But if it affects your work, or if he causes trouble, it ends. Understood?" She nodded again. She didn't smile. She just turned, opened the door, and walked back into the heat of the kitchen. From that day on, Claire took 10% of every tip and slid it into an envelope she kept in her locker. It meant no new winter coat. It meant skipping the dentist again. It meant eating canned soup 4 nights a week. But each morning, when the boy walked in, the plate was waiting. Hot, ready, quiet. Then one Thursday in late November, he didn't come. Claire set the plate anyway. Pancakes, light syrup, 2 strips of bacon. She placed it on the table at 7:14. At 7:55, it remained untouched. By closing time, the pancakes had gone cold. Claire wrapped them in foil and carried them home like a promise she didn't know how to break. The next day, still no boy, nor the day after. A week passed. Kathy shook her head as she scrubbed the flat top. "Told you," she said, not unkindly. "They disappear. That's what strays do." Claire didn't answer. She kept making the food, kept setting the plate, kept waiting. Then someone took a photo. A woman with too much perfume and a phone always in hand snapped a picture of the empty booth and the full plate. Claire didn't notice, not until the post showed up online, a local community page. Rosie's Diner now serving imaginary charity cases. The caption was cruel, the comments worse. Publicity stunt. Bet she throws it away after posing for likes. Feeding strays just teaches them to keep begging. Next time a weird kid hangs around your business, remember this. You're being set up. Claire stared at the screen in her dim apartment. Her hands didn't move. The words blurred and burned. She shut the laptop slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood, crossed the room, opened the small wooden box on the top shelf of her closet. Inside, a faded photograph of her father in his army medic uniform. Beside it, a pocket-sized leather journal, cracked, creased, the pages warped from dust and sweat. She opened to a marked page, read the words she already knew. Shared a half ration with a boy today. Johnson said I was crazy, said he might be a spy. But the look in his eyes when he ate. Same as mine, back when Mom would save me the last slice of bread. No one grows poor by sharing, but those who forget to stay hungry their whole lives. Claire ran her fingers over the faded ink, closed her eyes. Then she made pancakes. Again. On the 23rd morning of his absence, Claire walked into the diner as usual. She didn't expect anything anymore. The ritual of preparing that extra plate had become muscle memory, a gesture made not out of hope, but out of grief. By now, most of the town had moved on. Kathy had stopped commenting. The booth was just another table again. Claire still wiped it down twice, still folded the napkin neatly, still placed the fork parallel to the plate. It didn't matter that no one sat there. Until 9:17 a.m., the diner was halfway through its breakfast rush when the air shifted. Not the temperature, the atmosphere. Conversations trailed off. Coffee cups froze mid-air. Claire looked up from refilling creamers just in time to see them. 4 black SUVs, parked with surgical precision across the tiny gravel lot. Their license plates were government issue. From the laid vehicle, a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, skin like old leather. His uniform fit too well to be ceremonial. This wasn't for show. His chest bore enough medals to weigh him down, but he stood straight. Flanked by 2 younger officers, he approached the door. The bell above the frame jingled, a small, incongruous sound. Claire was still holding the creamers when he entered. Mark emerged from the back, straightening his stained tie, voice tight. "Can I help you?" The man removed his cap. His eyes scanned the room. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "Claire Rowan." She didn't move, but every head turned. Even the cook stopped mid-order. The silence was full of breath held too long. "I'm Claire," she said finally. Her voice was even. Only her hand trembled, ever so slightly. The officer stepped forward. His voice softened. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Barrett Hale, U.S. Special Forces Command." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out an envelope. Crisp, official. "I'm here because of a promise." He extended it toward her. Claire didn't take it. Not yet. She stared at the envelope like it might bite. "The boy you've been feeding," the colonel said gently. "His name is Eli Mercer. His father was Staff Sergeant Nathan Mercer. He served under my command." Claire's stomach dropped. The pieces, the boy's silence, his watchfulness, the hunger, began to fall into place. "He never told anyone his father had been deployed," Hale continued. "After Sergeant Mercer left for a classified mission overseas, Eli's mother walked out, left him alone. He was too proud, or maybe too scared, to ask for help." Claire felt a chill rise up the back of her neck. She remembered his eyes, how they never looked away from the exits, how he'd devour food like it might vanish, how he never let his guard down. "He survived with what his father left him," Hale said. "Made it stretch, but not far. And then, he found your diner." The room was silent. Every word landed like a drop in still water. 2 months ago," Hale continued, "Sergeant Mercer was killed in action. He left behind a final letter, and in it, he asked that, if anything happened to him, we find the woman who had been feeding his son." Claire's breath caught. "He didn't know your name. Eli didn't know your name, but he wrote about you. Said you never asked questions, never made him feel small, just fed him day after day." Hale opened the envelope, removed a folded letter. "This was read at Sergeant Mercer's memorial, but he wanted it delivered to you." He held it out. Claire took it with both hands, careful not to bend the paper. Her fingers shook. "You didn't just feed a child," Hale said. "You preserved the dignity of a soldier's son." Behind him, the 2 officers stood at attention. The colonel's voice cracked, just once. "What you did, without even knowing who he was, means more than you'll ever understand." Then he stood straight, eyes locked with hers, and saluted. A formal, precise, deliberate gesture. Behind him, the 2 officers followed, and outside, through the windows, Claire saw them. Every man who had come in those SUVs, every uniformed figure, saluting in perfect, synchronized silence. A moment later, a sound. A voice from the far booth. The same man who'd once said, "Kids these days expect handouts." He stood slowly. "I was wrong," he said, and he bowed his head. So did the others. No music played. No one clapped. But the room held something heavier than noise, reverence. Claire stood at the center of it all, holding a dead soldier's final thank you in her hands. Her apron smelled faintly of syrup and coffee. Her eyes were wet. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but there were no words. None were needed. That night, the letter stayed on her kitchen table, She didn't frame it, didn't tuck it away, just stared at it, again and again, until the handwriting blurred with the edges of memory. The kind of blur that comes not from time, but from weight. The weight of being seen, of being thanked for something you never thought anyone would notice. The next morning, something waited at her usual station, a plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note on wide-ruled notebook paper. The letters were formed carefully, like someone who still traced between lines. Clare read slowly, her chest tightening with every word. Dear Miss Clare, I didn't know your name until that day, but every morning you looked at me like I wasn't invisible, like I wasn't broken. Dad used to say heroes don't wear capes. I think maybe they wear aprons. When he stopped writing, I thought the world had forgotten us both. But you remembered me. Every day. Even when I couldn't tell you why I was alone. Grandma and Grandpa are teaching me to fish. Grandma makes good cookies. I miss Dad. Sometimes I miss your pancakes, too. Thank you for not asking questions when I couldn't answer them. Your friend, Eli Mercer P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending after all. Clare folded the letter slowly, her fingers lingering on the creases. Then she walked behind the counter and pinned it to the wall. Not in the center, not with a spotlight. Just above the register, where she could see it between customers. A quiet reminder that not all stories vanish when the plates are cleared. Hillview Cafe changed after that. The story spread. First in whispers, then in headlines. The same community page that had once mocked her now posted the full account. Letter, salute, everything. The post was shared over 80,000 times. Veterans stopped in on their way through town, leaving behind patches, coins, and thank you notes scribbled on napkins. Families asked to sit in his booth. Some days Clare arrived to find strangers already waiting, hands folded, eyes soft. Mark didn't say much, but one day, without a word, he hung a small American flag over the booth where Eli used to sit. Beneath it, a discreet plaque appeared, reserved for those who serve and the families who wait. The booth was never empty again. It wasn't always soldiers who sat there. Sometimes it was a single mother with 3 kids. Sometimes a man in a suit who ordered nothing but coffee. Sometimes a girl with too many bags under her eyes and not enough coins in her pocket. No one ever asked. No one needed to. Kindness had grown legs, found its own way forward. One quiet Thursday, almost a year to the day since Eli first walked into the diner, Clare arrived to open as usual. The sun hadn't cleared the trees yet. The booths were empty, the register still asleep. But at her station, right where she always left her order pad, something gleamed. A coin. Military issue, heavy in the palm. One side bore the insignia of the Special Forces. The other had been custom engraved, Semper Memor, always remembering. She looked up. No one was outside. No cars. No uniforms. Just the wind brushing through the faded flag above the door. Clare slipped the coin into her pocket. Let it rest there, warm now, like it belonged. That afternoon, she hung up her apron, wiped her hands, and watched as Mark taped a new sign to the front window. Simple white letters on a clean black background. Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry. He caught her looking, shrugged, said nothing. Clare just nodded. Her hand brushed the coin in her pocket. No grand speeches, no big declarations, just a new rule, a quiet one. One that said, someone saw you, someone cared, even if they didn't ask your name. That evening, the streets of Halberd settled into their usual rhythm. Porch lights clicking on one by one, dogs barking at nothing, the distant hum of the high school football field under Friday night lights. Claire walked home as she always did, alone, hands in pockets, keys pressed between her fingers. Except this time, she wasn't carrying weight. She was carrying something quieter, a knowing. She passed the old pharmacy without glancing at the window that used to reflect her back at herself. Past the laundromat where she once waited hours because her apartment machine had flooded again. Past the corner where Eli once sat alone with a book too old for his age. And when she reached her door, she looked back just once. The diner was still lit. The sign still glowed. No one leaves hungry. The words weren't about food, not anymore. The next week, a school group visited after a field trip. Dozens of children crammed into booths, swinging their legs under the table, talking too loud, laughing with that boundless ease only kids still untouched by loss could afford. Claire moved through them with practiced rhythm, refilling sodas, delivering burgers, smiling when asked for extra ketchup. Then, a small voice beside her. "My dad says you're a hero," said a girl with braids and wide eyes. She said it plainly, the way children do when they don't understand the weight of the word they've just handed someone. Claire knelt, met her gaze. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to be hungry." The girl blinked. Not just for food. Behind her, the teacher, a woman in glasses and a navy sweatshirt, looked over, smiled faintly, and nodded. Claire stood, her back a little straighter. In the weeks that followed, soldiers kept coming. So did letters. One was from a man who said he had once served with Nathan Mercer. Another from a woman who'd lost her husband in Iraq and said that knowing Claire existed made her feel less alone. One envelope contained only a single line, written in delicate cursive. "You reminded me that my son is still worth saving." Mark built a bulletin board behind the register. It started with 1 coin, then 2, then a row of shoulder patches, pins, messages in multiple languages. Claire never organized them. She just added to it, quietly, piece by piece. They called it the wall. People started leaving bills beneath their plates without names attached. Some were folded into napkins. Others left behind as bookmarks in dog-eared books. Every dollar went into the jar by the register marked, "For the ones waiting at the window." By spring, the town had changed. Not in a loud, revolutionary way. Halberd would never be that kind of place. But in subtle gestures, a hand reaching out instead of pulling away, a second chair pulled at a table where there had only ever been one. And Claire? She kept walking to the diner each morning, tying her apron, brewing the coffee, preparing the booth. She never saw Eli again, but she didn't expect to. She had seen enough. Because sometimes, kindness returns the long way around, in the shape of a letter, in the weight of a coin, in the silence of a room full of people standing in respect. And if you asked her, really asked her, whether it had been worth it, whether that one plate every morning for a boy who never asked her for anything had changed anything at all, she'd just smile, wipe her hands on her apron, and say, "No one leaves hungry. That's all."